Welcome everyone. Today we travel back to one of the most dramatic stories in all of human history, the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who came from almost nothing and built an empire that shook the entire world. It is the late 1700s. Europe is a continent on fire. Old kingdoms are crumbling. New ideas about freedom and equality are spreading fast. And in the middle of all this chaos, a young soldier from a small island is watching, waiting, and planning. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, a rocky, mountainous place in the Mediterranean Sea. His family was not rich or powerful. They were minor nobles, which means they had a little status but very little money. From the beginning, Napoleon knew that if he wanted something, he would have to fight for it. As a boy, he was sent to military school in France. He was different from the other students. He was short, he spoke French with a strong accent, and the other boys sometimes laughed at him. But while they played, Napoleon studied. He read books about great military leaders. He learned mathematics. He practiced strategy like it was a game he was determined to win. The smoke-filled streets of Paris in 1789 changed everything. The French Revolution had begun. The old king was losing power. The people were angry and hungry. Soldiers like Napoleon suddenly had opportunities that had never existed before. In the old France, your family name decided your future. In the new France, talent and courage could take you anywhere. Napoleon moved quickly. By the age of 24, he was already a general. He led French armies into Italy and won battle after battle with tactics that surprised everyone. His soldiers loved him. He spoke to them directly, remembered their names, shared their food. They believed he was something special, maybe even something magical. In 1798, Napoleon led an expedition to Egypt. He wanted to cut off British trade routes and build French power in the East. He brought scientists and scholars with him, not just soldiers. This tells us something important about Napoleon: he was not only a warrior. He was a thinker who believed knowledge was power. The Egyptian campaign was not a complete military success, but it made Napoleon famous across Europe. When he returned to France, the country was in trouble. The government was weak and people were afraid. Napoleon saw his moment. In November 1799, he took control of the French government in a coup, a sudden seizure of power. He called himself First Consul. France had a new leader. The years that followed were extraordinary. Napoleon reformed the legal system and created the Napoleonic Code, a set of clear laws that treated all citizens more equally. This was revolutionary. Before Napoleon, laws were different in every region and often favored the rich and powerful. His new code spread across Europe and parts of it still influence laws in many countries today. This reminds us that even today, the legal systems of France, Belgium, Quebec in Canada, and Louisiana in the United States carry the fingerprints of one ambitious man from Corsica. In 1804, Napoleon did something that shocked the world. He declared himself Emperor of France. The ceremony took place in the great Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The Pope himself had traveled to be there. But when the moment came to place the crown on his head, Napoleon took it from the Pope's hands and crowned himself. The message was clear: no one gave him this power. He had taken it. The crowd in the cathedral held its breath. Some people felt pride. Some felt fear. And some, who had believed in the revolution and its dream of equality, felt something close to heartbreak. Was this the end of the republic they had fought for? But Napoleon kept winning. His armies swept across Europe. He defeated Austria, Prussia, and Russia in famous battles. At the Battle of Austerlitz in December 1805, he faced a combined Russian and Austrian army that was larger than his own. He pretended to be weak on one side, drawing the enemy toward him, then struck hard at their center. It was a masterpiece of military strategy. Historians still study it today. At his peak, Napoleon controlled or influenced most of continental Europe. His brothers and friends sat on the thrones of Spain, Holland, and other kingdoms. It seemed like nothing could stop him. But here is what almost no one talks about. Napoleon's greatest enemy was not another general or another army. It was his own ambition, and the resistance of ordinary people who refused to accept foreign rule. In Spain, Napoleon placed his brother Joseph on the throne. The Spanish people did not accept this. They fought back in a brutal guerrilla war, small groups attacking French soldiers and then disappearing into the mountains and villages. This war dragged on for years and cost France enormous amounts of money and men. Napoleon himself later called Spain his bleeding wound. Then came the decision that many historians consider his greatest mistake. In 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia with an army of over 600,000 soldiers, the largest army Europe had ever seen. He expected a quick victory. He did not get one. The Russian army retreated, pulling the French deeper and deeper into the country. Villages were burned so the French could not use them for shelter or food. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow in September, he found the city on fire. The Russians had burned their own capital rather than let him have it. Napoleon waited in the ruins of Moscow for weeks, hoping the Russian Tsar would come and negotiate. He never did. Then winter arrived. The temperature dropped far below freezing. The French soldiers, many of them wearing summer uniforms, began to die in the snow. The retreat from Moscow was a catastrophe. Of the 600,000 soldiers who had entered Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned. The image is almost impossible to imagine: hundreds of thousands of men, exhausted and frozen, struggling through endless white fields, their boots falling apart, their faces hollow with hunger. Officers who had once ridden proudly on horseback now walked on bleeding feet. The great empire was bleeding out in the Russian winter. Europe saw Napoleon's weakness and moved against him. Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Britain formed a coalition. In October 1813, at the Battle of Leipzig, called the Battle of Nations, Napoleon faced armies from all sides. It was the largest battle in European history up to that point. He lost. In April 1814, Napoleon was forced to give up his throne. He was sent into exile on the island of Elba, a small island off the coast of Italy. He was given the title of ruler of Elba, a small comfort for a man who had once ruled most of Europe. Imagine sitting on a tiny island, watching the sea, knowing that just across the water was the continent you had once commanded. But Napoleon was not finished. In February 1815, he escaped from Elba with a small group of soldiers. He landed in southern France and marched north. As he walked, French soldiers who had been sent to stop him instead joined him. By the time he reached Paris, he had an army again. This extraordinary return is called the 100 Days. Europe mobilized against him immediately. The final battle came on June 18, 1815, near a small town in Belgium called Waterloo. Napoleon faced the British army under the Duke of Wellington. The battle was long and brutal. Napoleon attacked again and again, but Wellington held his lines. Then, late in the afternoon, Prussian forces arrived to support the British. Napoleon's army collapsed. It was over. Napoleon surrendered to the British and was sent to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of kilometers from Europe. There was no escape from this place. He spent his final years there, dictating his memoirs, walking in the garden, and slowly declining in health. He died on May 5, 1821. He was 51 years old. The doctors said he died of stomach cancer. Some people have suggested other causes. But perhaps what truly killed Napoleon was something harder to measure: the loss of purpose, the silence after a life of constant movement and action. So what does this extraordinary story teach us about human nature? Napoleon's life shows us the incredible power of talent, hard work, and belief in oneself. A boy from a poor family on a small island rose to become the most powerful man in the world. That is genuinely remarkable. His legal reforms, his reorganization of education and government, his spreading of revolutionary ideas across Europe, these things had lasting positive effects that we still feel today. But his story also shows us the danger of believing you are beyond limits. Napoleon stopped listening to advisors who told him difficult truths. He believed his own legend so completely that he could not see when he was wrong. The invasion of Russia was not a surprise to everyone around him. Some of his most trusted generals warned him. He did not listen. There is also something deeply human in Napoleon's story: the hunger to be seen, to matter, to leave a mark on the world. He came from a place where he was an outsider, where people laughed at his accent and his background. Everything he built was, in some way, a response to those early feelings of being small and overlooked. This reminds us that even today, many of the world's most driven people are running towards something, but also running away from something. The question is whether we can find the wisdom to know when enough is enough, before the pursuit of more destroys everything we have already built. Napoleon Bonaparte was not simply a villain or a hero. He was a human being of extraordinary ability and extraordinary flaws, ambitious, brilliant, generous to his soldiers, ruthless to his enemies, capable of great vision and terrible blindness. His empire rose like a comet and fell just as fast. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Power built on force alone cannot last. Empires that ignore the will of ordinary people will eventually fall. The Russian peasants who burned their villages, the Spanish fighters who disappeared into the mountains, the soldiers who finally said no, they remind us that history is not only made by the powerful. It is also shaped by the quiet resistance of those who refuse to give up.